In my opinion, the greatest philosopher that ever existed was Aristotle. My favorite aspects of his philosophical teachings were in regards to engaging and developing in the intellectual virtues, which includes knowledges of fundamental truths, in other words, logic, and knowledges of inference or determination, in other words, empiricism. The intellectual virtues are not just used to understand mathematics and science, but also used to understand the nature of morality, religion, economics, and politics. Basically, if you want to know the world that you live in, you need to practice in the intellectual virtues. If Aristotle was alive today, he would be ashamed of what has happened in the Western world, especially what has happened to political discourse in academia, institutions of higher knowledge. Instead of universities embracing logic and empiricism, universities have decided to value feelings over ideas. We see this in the form of campus censorship. If enough people get offended over a particular subject or ideology, students and professors alike will actively work to censor you. If you're part of a men's rights club, a pro-life club, a pro-Israel club, or even a free speech club, professors will decry you in class, maybe even give you lower marks. Students will show up to your club's events and meetings to almost always violently disrupt. And administrators will remove your club status or officially ban you or no platform any speakers that are coming onto your campus for your event, all because they disagree with you. These people see your ideas, thus you, as an ideological enemy. Another example of universities valuing feelings over ideas is in the treatment of students. We've seen universities build safe spaces for leftist students, rooms full of puppies and bubbles. Meanwhile, they use the police to prevent speakers from coming onto campus. We've seen universities place trigger warnings everywhere remotely disagreeable. You don't want whites to pay for reparations? Triggered. You don't want to use my made-up pronouns? Triggered. Oh, you don't quite agree with Black Lives Matter or feminism? Triggered. Get off our campus, these students say to guests and fellow students. What kind of culture does this create on university campuses? In other words, what does the rejection of logic and empiricism, the intellectual virtues, have on the ideas expressed and the beliefs commonly held by the people who are within universities? Well, as you can imagine, it creates people who are intellectually uniform or politically orthodox. In America, for example, right now, around 40% of Americans self-identify as conservatives, 35% self-identify as moderates, centrists, or independents, and only 25% self-identify as liberals. In America, right now, the overwhelming majority of people are not liberal. Americans do not consider themselves liberal on average or left-wing on average. However, in universities, liberal professors outnumber conservative professors by 6 to 1. Liberals outnumber moderates and centrists 3 to 1. In fact, even Marxist and communist professors, some of them I've argued with, outnumber conservative professors. The percentage of conservative professors teaching on university campuses is around 10 to 15%. The number of Marxist and communist professors teaching on campuses, 18 to 25%. Academia is in a Marxist world of its own. Universities have every incentive not to enter into the real world and practice logic and empiricism like the rest of us. Whereas in the real world, you need to be correct most of the time. Universities are almost never punished for advocating terribly disruptive and wrong ideas. If an architect created a completely illogically structured building, they would be fired on the spot. If a biologist did not base their findings and claims off of empirical reality of animal behavior, for example, they would be fired on the spot. However, if an intellectual, especially in the social sciences and humanities, creates the most regressive and counterintuitive economic system in human history, they don't get fired. They don't get punished. They, in fact, get memorialized. When China and Russia entered into the chaos of violence because of communism, the intellectuals sat back and smoked a cigar. When the relations between men and women were severely ruined because of feminism's patriarchy theory, the intellectuals sat back and sipped wine. These intellectuals, or at this point, let's just call them charlatans, sometimes get paid by the state to say what they're saying, to say the terribly wrong things and to teach the terribly wrong things they're saying to people, impressionable minds. When people like students, for example, disagree with what they have to say, they, or the sheep that they've indoctrinated, work to censor us. And that's the environment that we have currently on university campuses and all across the Western world. Universities are not about honest political discourse. They are no longer about logic and empiricism, the intellectual virtues. They are about pushing their ideological agenda. And what is their agenda? Simple. Universities want the power to change the world, in part by overthrowing power structures and privilege. And they see political diversity as an obstacle towards them gaining power for themselves. That's why if you have a different political opinion and you're on a university campus, you get censored. This is not evil conspiracy, by the way. This is the result of the charlatans' hunger for power, widespread Marxist thinking, and us paying them to teach us these terrible, unproven, sometimes disproven theories. But it has real-world results. Communism ruined countries. Patriarchy theory ruined the way so many women view men. And now today, universities teach minorities to fear and hate whites. Universities teach young people that there are a countless number of genders, infinite amount of genders, in fact. Once these students get out into the real world, they see the world in the lens that their university has placed onto them. Everyone is out to get them, they think. Our government is paying millions upon millions of dollars to indoctrinate millions and millions of young people, not to think of empirical or logical thoughts, but instead to indoctrinate them into the ideas that are inherently anti-civilization, and to create misguided political activists. The problem with university is that these charlatans, the intellectuals, want power that they don't have. In that quest, they create all sorts of theories as to why the world is against them and you. They then teach millions of young people these theories. And then, well, you know the rest. Chaos ensues. I'll end this video off with a quote from George Orwell. Keep in mind, George Orwell has seen firsthand the hubris and resentment that the intellectuals had on society. The intellectuals desire to shape the world the way they want to, the way they see it, no matter what the consequences are. Orwell has seen how destructive some bad ideas can be when it's taught to impressionable minds. Orwell's quote goes, "The intellectual is different from the ordinary man, but only in certain sections of his personality. And even then, not all the time. There are some ideas so absurd that only an intellectual could believe them." Today, that absurdity is ruining a generation of people. I'm Jay Feza from the Rebel.media. Thanks for watching. Hey, you like what you saw? You hate the climate on universities? Like and subscribe to the Rebel.media.